Hey there, welcome to the Smart Roof training. Today we're going to go over some modeling best practices with the Smart Roof tool. I'll share some key functions like how to model folds and dormers and how to add those into a structure. And then we'll go over a couple different residential examples ranging from easy, intermediate, and then some slightly more advanced roofs. Okay, so let's dive into some of our modeling best practices when using the Smart Roof tool. These are some of the tips and tricks that we highly recommend doing before you start modeling your structure to make sure that you have an accurate site model to build off of. Once you get some practice with this, you'll develop muscle memory and it'll become second nature to you. I'll demonstrate these tips and tricks within the software in a moment, but I want to give you the high-level bullet points first. So the first thing that I do when starting a new design is I begin by clicking on the Map Split button in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen to split your screen into two views. The one on the left will default to an overhead 45-degree view that you can rotate at 90-degree intervals to see a full 360-degree view of the property. You can also switch over to Google Street View, where you can virtually walk alongside the front of the home to get a better idea of any nearby obstructions, trees, shading threats, pitch of the roof, etc. You'll also want to take a look at the different imagery sources you'll have access to, including Google, Bing, or Nearmaps HD imagery. You can also upload your own high quality imagery, say from a drone, and then use our ruler tool to scale that custom imagery to the site. The same goes for new construction. So if you have your own design plans or blueprints, you can upload those drawings and scale them using the ruler tool within Aurora as well. As you begin to outline a roof, you'll notice that an orange dotted line will appear and you'll want to follow that as your guide. This orange dotted line creates a 90-degree snapping effect when outlining the roof perimeter. And then lastly, you'll have the ability to expand the satellite imagery in case you need to see more of the home surrounding area by simply double-clicking in the black area outside of the imagery. Here's a great slide showing the roof terminology that I'll be using as we go through modeling some of the residential properties here in a moment. So we've got hip, ridge, eave, rake, valley, gable, fascia, and roof to wall. Once you've outlined the perimeter of your structure in Aurora, a green banner will pop up that will say Edit Roof. You'll have 3 fold types to choose from, as well as 3 dormer types to choose from to add into your structure. So here we have a few examples of folds. The first one we have here is a flat fold, which is used when a pitched structure has a flat top section instead of a ridge on top. The second one here is a pitched fold. This is used when there's a change in the tilt in the roof face, like a barn, for example. And then the third here is a vertical fold. This is used to create a Dutch gable type of roof, almost like an overhanging attic or any time when the roof extends over the hips. And then here we have a few examples of dormers. The easiest way to distinguish between dormers is by counting the number of slopes. So the first one here is a gabled dormer, which has 2 slopes. Next, we have a hipped dormer, which has 3 slopes. And then lastly, we have a shed dormer that has just 1 single slope. So these are the addresses that we will be practicing with today. We're going to start with a simple gabled roof. Then I'll show you how to add several different types of folds, dormers, and splits. And then we'll jump into advanced roofs with merging vertical folds and different eave heights. After today's webinar, I highly recommend that you check out our Help Center by going to help.aurorasolar.com, or you can simply click on the question mark at the top right corner of your Aurora dashboard, which is where you can find all of our help articles, in-app guides, and where you can start a live chat with our support team. If you ever run into any technical issues, you can always submit a support request via the Help Center by clicking on Contact Us or by emailing them at support@aurorasolar.com. Okay, let's jump over to our demonstrations in Aurora. So before we get started, I want to quickly explain some of the features that we have here in Aurora and how to navigate them. So here in the bottom menu, you can see that we are looking at our imagery source is Nearmap imagery from October of 2021. So if I go ahead and click on that drop-down menu, I can toggle between Google, Bing, and Google HD. Of course, you will also see that you can click on the plus button here for Nearmaps HD imagery. Another option here is this custom button. This is where you're able to upload any custom imagery such as drone imagery or construction blueprints. If you use this feature, make sure that your files are either in a JPEG or a PNG file format. Another thing to mention is that if you're going to be spending a lot of time designing in Aurora, I highly recommend that you use a physical mouse with a scroll wheel so that you can zoom in and zoom out easily, and you can actually press down on that scroll wheel to pan around on the image. If you don't have a mouse with a scroll wheel, you can always hold down your spacebar on your computer's keyboard and left-click your image to pan the image as well. You can also switch between 3D and 2D by clicking here in the center of your compass. This will then allow you to see what this looks like in 2D versus 3D. You can also grab the ring of that compass to move things around side to side. And also, if ever you are kind of turned around and you just want to get back to a top-down imagery, you can click on that and then click on that little red triangle, which will bring you back to a north orientation. Using the right click on your mouse, you can also rotate the image to do the same thing, to go into that 3D or 2D view. Okay, so the first thing that I like to do when starting a new design is I want to check out all the available imagery of this property so that I can get a really good sense of what this property and roof look like. So again, I'm going to click on this map split button in the bottom left-hand corner. The right image is where we're going to actually be modeling the structure in Aurora. And the image on the left is that overhead 45-degree satellite view that we can rotate around by clicking on these little buttons to get a bit more familiar with the property. The little green house icon on the left here is also going to match up with the green house icon on the right to help us confirm that that is the same building that we're looking at. So as we're rotating around here, I can start to make some observations. I can see here that this is a simple gabled roof structure with just two roof faces and a major ridgeline running roughly north and south. Next, I'm going to click on Street View, which is super cool and allows you to see what the property looks like as if you're walking alongside the property virtually from the street. We can click on the little white arrows to move up and down the street to get a better sense of what the property looks like and address any potential shading threats. So now that I have observed the overhead 45-degree view and the street view, let's jump back over to our Aurora design. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Map Split once again to come back into that Aurora overhead view. Okay. So let's go ahead and begin our design of this property in Aurora. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I am on site over here on the left, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Smart Roof and Pitched. I'm going to zoom in here on my structure and get lined up. Please note that we can see here that we can kind of see the front face of this building, which means that this isn't a true top-down image. So just bear with me here for this example. What I'm going to do is go ahead and place nodes in all of the corners of this building. And as I click, now that I've got two nodes placed, you're going to notice that that orange dotted line starts to appear. And I'm going to follow that orange dotted line as my guide. So as I place those nodes, we'll follow around the whole perimeter and seal it back up at the beginning. So now you can see that we're here in the edit roof mode where this green ribbon appears at the top. This gives us the option to add any folds or dormers. You can also see that there are 4 roof planes here that are showing up in Smart Roof. This is because the number of nodes that you place correspond to the number of roof planes that are generated. But as we observed earlier, this roof clearly only has 2 roof planes. So what we want to do is simply identify the major ridgeline and then remove some of the extra roof planes by unpitching. So what we're going to do is we can see here that this major ridgeline runs north-south. So we know that this roof face does not actually exist, neither does this roof face. So a couple different ways to go about unpitching or removing these extra roof faces is I can simply click once on there and it's going to highlight that roof face in blue. On the right-hand side here, you're going to see that there's a little button that says pitch type, and we can simply say unpitch and click on this. And that will simply get rid of that extra roof face. Another easy way to do this is by clicking on that roof face and hitting the delete key on your keyboard. Okay, so now simply get out of edit roof mode. We can do this by either hitting the escape button up here in the edit roof banner, or by hitting the escape key on your keyboard, or simply by double left clicking anywhere outside of your model. This is going to hold all of that in place. And so that gives us the beginnings of our 3D structure. As we noted earlier, this was a 2-story tall building. So how do we change how tall this building is? So if I click once on the whole building, the whole thing will turn blue. And this menu on the right-hand side will open up where you have the option to manually type in the number of stories. That's one option of how we can do this. Or with this building still being highlighted in blue, I can simply click on Fit to LiDAR, and that will adjust it to LiDAR, which also is going to account for the correct height and pitch of the roof. If we want to confirm what that looks like, we can simply click on LiDAR to be able to see how that imagery is matching up with the LiDAR imagery as well. You can also open up the LiDAR settings and be able to look at different styles of LiDAR. Sometimes the point cloud is helpful to see, and you can now see that all of those little dots are intersecting the roof line at roughly the same place, which means that we've got this lined up correctly. To turn off LiDAR, simply click on the LiDAR button once again. Now that we have gone ahead and modeled this simple gabled structure and adjusted it for height and pitch using LiDAR, we are going to be able to go ahead and click save and move on to our next example. Okay, so again, I'm always going to start by taking a look at the imagery that we have available and make as many observations as I can. We're going to go ahead and click on Map Split and rotate around just to make sure that we've gotten as much information as we can about this building. So it looks like we've got a couple different slopes on this building, but it does appear that we have a flat section on top. I'm also going to confirm that by just clicking into Street View to take a quick peek. And it does appear that we've got a flat top on this building. Jumping back over to our Aurora imagery, we're going to go ahead and simply just start to design the building here. So what I'm going to do is click on Site and Smart Roof and Pitched. And we're simply going to place a node in the corner of this building, right, like so, using those orange dotted lines to help us line up as best we can. And we're simply going to place a node in every corner of this building, following that orange dotted line and sealing it back up at the beginning. Great. So we can see that this actually is matching up pretty well with our underlying imagery. Again, reminding you that every node that you place is going to correspond with a roof face. So we've got, 6 different nodes placed here. So we've got 6 different roof faces. What we want to do though is we want to model that flat fold on top. So the best way to do that is by using our Edit Roof tool at the top with the Insert Fold option. The first one here is going to be our flat fold. So I can click on that once, and I can simply drag this in, and I'm going to click once it matches up with that imagery that I'm looking for. So right about there. And if I come into 3D using the right click on my mouse, I can see that I have now accurately modeled for that flat fold on top. I'm going to double click outside of my image to be able to hold that all in place, and everything looks good. We're going to go ahead and click save and move on to our next example. Okay, so for our third project here, I'm going to show you how to model a pitched fold. We're going to be focusing on this blue roof here. Right off the bat, this imagery isn't super great, but I can make a couple observations. Initially, it almost looks like our first example, a gabled roof, but there's something happening here on the right-hand side with some shadows or discoloration. Let's open up our map split to see if we're able to get a better sense of what this building looks like. Opening up map split isn't actually much better. In this particular example, we don't have the option of those little rotational arrows, so this isn't going to do us much good. What I can do though is click over to Street View to see if that's going to give us any better information. All right, so using Street View, I'm able to see here that that blue roofed structure is a barn-like structure. I can actually zoom in on this to get a better sense of what we're looking at, but we're able to now confirm this tree is a little bit in the way, but we can pretty easily tell that it looks like this is a symmetrical building with 6 different roof faces, and each set of roof faces having a symmetrical pair. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is close our map split, and let's start to outline the perimeter of this structure, just starting with the basic rectangular shape. So I'm going to zoom in so that I can get as accurate as possible. And we're going to go ahead, making sure that we're on site, and click on Smart Roof and Pitched. Okay, so to start, I'm going to just draw the perimeter of this roof to get a basic rectangular shape. I'll do my best to follow these lines, even though they aren't perfectly clean. It doesn't look like this is true top-down imagery. It might be a little bit skewed, so just bear with me here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Site, Smart Roof, and Pitched. And we're going to place our nodes in the corners of this building, following that orange dotted line and sealing it back up at the beginning. Perfect. So we can see here that we've got some unpitching to do. We know that this roof face does not exist, and neither does this roof face. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and click on that and hit the delete button on my keyboard. And I'm going to do the same thing here. And there we go. Now we're left with just the basic gabled structure. So what we want to do is add in those pitched folds. So it's a little bit hard to see here, but it looks to me like we've got some little discoloration happening right about here and one right about here. It's definitely hard to tell. We can definitely see the one over here, but that lower one is pretty invisible to us with that shadow. So let's go ahead and use this insert fold. The third button over is going to be our pitched fold. And I'm going to simply come in from the left and hover and then click where I see that discoloration occurring. So right about there. And then the next one looks to me like it's happening right about there. Okay, so if I zoom in, I can now start to see some measurements here, which is going to help me to line everything up to do the same thing on the other side. So we know that I want to come in 3.7 feet. I can click right there, click on our pitch fold button again, and come into the 5-foot mark. There we go. Okay, so now that we have that, I can zoom out and see that we've modeled and we've got our 6 different roof faces. However, the pitch and angle is not correct on this. So what we want to do is we can open up that map split, and we can now observe, if we zoom in, it looks like we've got, a pretty slight angle at the top, a fairly steep angle in the middle, and then it kind of evens out to a pretty normal slant on the edges. So we can select these in pairs. So clicking on one roof face and holding down the shift key, I can now select the opposite pair for that roof, those roof pairings. And all I need to do is on the side here, I can actually just type in or use the slide bar to be able to adjust that pitch height. So we can see, let's see, maybe we're somewhere around 18 degrees for that top piece. Let's go ahead and select the middle 2 pieces, and those 2 roof faces now selected. Let's go ahead and push that a bit higher. That looked to me like it was maybe about 60 degrees. And then the bottom set of roof faces, if we select both of those holding down the shift key, let's say this looks to me to be, about, maybe not quite that, maybe about 29, something like that. And I can click the escape button here or double click to exit my edit roof banner. And there you go. Now we have accurately modeled that barn-like structure. One other thing worth mentioning is that if you want to get really accurate with these models, like I showed you earlier, you can always click once on the whole building and then click on Fit to LiDAR so that it adjusts for the correct height and pitch of that building. Now I can go ahead and double click outside of there, and we can save by clicking the little save button in the upper left-hand corner of our Aurora menu. Let's move on to our next example. Okay, so as always, we want to start by taking a look at all of our imagery to get a really good sense of what this roof looks like. So we can go ahead and click on Map Split in the bottom left-hand corner to try to find any hidden roof features that you can't see from just the top-down image alone. So we are going to go ahead and click on this and rotate around to start to see what we can observe. So from the back, this is actually showing us a really good view with this hipped dormer in the back. And it looks like we've got 3 gabled dormers in the front. So if I jump back over to my map split, I can identify the gabled dormers in the front and then the single hipped dormer in the back. Let's take another peek really quick at Google Street View just to confirm. And here I can move to the side to get a good sense of what this looks like. And here, this is something that we hadn't seen yet, is that this is a pretty steep feature here, this major ridgeline in the back, or I guess in the center of the building. This is pretty darn steep, and so we'll want to make sure that we model that accurately. If I move over here to the right, we can now also see that we've got 1, 2, and that garage as our 3 gabled dormers. Okay, so let's move back over into our Aurora imagery and start to make our design. So what we want to do is go ahead and zoom in. Another piece that we can take a look at is if any of these are going to provide us with any better imagery. It doesn't look like it. So let's go ahead and move forward with Google Maps. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to click on Site and Smart Roof and Pitched. And the important thing to remember when modeling a roof with dormers is that we want to ignore the dormers first and simply draw the basic rectangular shape to start. So that means I am going to place a node here in this corner, coming straight across and placing a node in that corner, ignoring the dormer. And we're going to come down here and just make that basic rectangular shape to start. Okay. So we can see this major ridgeline running roughly east to west. And so that means that this roof face and this roof face don't actually exist. So let's go ahead and unpitch those. So using the right click mouse button, I can now see that we've got that basic structure, that kind of shape that we want, but we know that this is a lot steeper than this is actually showing us. So if I go ahead and double click outside of my building, and click once on here, I can actually now click on Fit to LiDAR, and that is going to help us bring that up into that correct pitch of the roof line. Now, what we want to do is double click on our roof face to bring that green Edit Roof banner back. So now with that open, we can go ahead and use our dormers. So the first one here is a gabled dormer. I'm going to go ahead and click on that once and bring that over. And as you can see, it is a smart roof tool because when you're outside of the building that you have modeled, it's not going to let you place that dormer outside of the roof. It turns red. And so once you're hovering back inside the building, that turns blue to show you that you're in the right place. It also is going to automatically flip over that major ridgeline. So let's zoom in here. And I'm going to go ahead and place our first node right about here at this peak. And then I'm going to drag this down and just kind of create the basic shape of that garage dormer. And then now I can pull down these middle whiskers, I like to call them, to get that to line up with that underlying imagery. And if I come out into our 3D view, you can now see that that garage has now been modeled. Let's go ahead and do the same thing with our other 2 dormers here. So I can simply place that peak node right about there, get that to line up like so, and follow that underlying imagery, pulling down our whiskers. Same thing again for this third one, and right about there. And we can pull down our whiskers to there. I'll double click outside of my building to hold that all in place. And now we can take a peek at what that looks like. Looks pretty good. And now let's flip over to the back side of the house to draw this hipped dormer. So I can do that, by, clicking and moving myself around like that, or I can simply click on the opposite little node of the compass point, and that'll spin me around 180 degrees to reorient. Okay, so now let's go ahead and model this hipped dormer in the back. So in order to do that, we want to get that edit roof banner open again. And to do that, we'll double click on this roof. You see that green edit roof banner open up, and we can now select our second dormer type, and we can place that node, that peak node at the top right about there. Drag this down and over to about there. That looks good to me. And now we can pull down our whiskers so that that all matches up and is going to look good. We can click escape or double click outside of our image. And now we can see that we have accurately modeled this structure, which has 3 gabled dormers in the front and a hipped dormer in the back. I can now go ahead and click on save, and we can move on to our next example. Okay, so sometimes you're going to run into structures that have a split in the roof, and this could be due to a change in the roof pitch or just having eaves at different heights. So notice that in this particular building, we've got, it looks like a major ridgeline that's a little bit broken, but it tends to run roughly east to west. So let's open up our map split and see what else we can observe. Okay, so here in this imagery, we're able to get a better sense of what we're looking at. These shadows are going to start to give us a clue that there might be a split occurring in the roof. So if I rotate around, we can also see a split occurring here by the garage. And if we keep going around the back of the house, we can now see that, yes, we've got that shadow here indicating another split and another split here on the side. We can drop down into Street View to also confirm that, yep, we've got a split occurring there by the garage. And if we move over, we can now see that split on the side here. Okay, so let's jump back into our Aurora image. This isn't the best, but we can always play around with different imagery sources, but I think this will be good enough for now. So let's go ahead and click on Site, Smart Roof, and Pitched. We simply want to place our nodes in all of the corners, especially where we see a split occurring. So I've got my first node. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click where I see that split occurring and simply just place nodes in all of the perimeters of this building. We know that there is a split occurring here by the garage. And then we are going to actually just ignore this dormer and come straight across and make sure that we place nodes in the corners here for that front split and seal it up in the back. Okay, so this might look a little bit scary at first, but we just have a little bit of unpitching to do, so don't worry. So if I zoom in here, we can take a closer look. So we know that we had that major ridgeline that roughly runs east-west. So that means that this roof face does not exist. I'll go ahead and hit the delete key on my keyboard. We also know that this wedge does not exist, so we can delete that. Now you can actually start to see that split starting to occur. So let's go ahead and continue with some unpitching. We know that this wedge does not exist. Neither does this wedge, and neither does this roof face. So now that we've done some unpitching, I'm going to go ahead and double click outside of my drawing to hold all of that in place. And using the right click button on my mouse, I can kind of zoom out and zoom around this to see that now we have accurately modeled this property that has the roof splits in the front by the garage, the side, and the back. There we go. And now I can go ahead and click save. I'm not going to actually model this dormer in the front since we just did that on the last example. Okay, so for this example, we've got a lot going on here and we want to just break it down into bite-sized chunks. So here we can see that we've got maybe it looks like a higher section of the roof here, and then some lower sections that are getting shade from the upper. Can't really tell a ton from the top-down imagery. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and open up Map Split. And now we can start to get a better sense of what this property looks like. So this indeed does appear to be a taller, second story maybe. I'm going to rotate around to see what else we can observe. It also looks like we are working with a property that has some vertical folds. So we can take a peek at Street View to get a better sense of that. So here we can see a vertical fold. If I scoot back, we can actually see a vertical fold occurring there as well. Let's jump to the very front of the building so that we can see a little bit better. Yeah, here we go. So we've got behind this tree is another vertical fold, another one here. Some also really interesting things happening with this roof line. So we've got this roof face that's all continuous in the same direction. So we'll want to model that. And then we've got this little valley where this garage matches up with this front-facing roof face. So a couple different pieces that we're going to want to model. Another observation to make is that this higher section, the eave lines never intersect with the lower part of the house. So that'll be really interesting to model as well. Okay, so let's jump back out of our Map Split and start to model this property. I always like to start with the tallest section first and then kind of work my way down. So let's go ahead and click on Site and Smart Roof and Pitched. And I'm going to go ahead and place nodes in the top kind of higher point here, but all of the corners of this roof and following my orange dotted lines. There we go. Okay, so instead of any unpitching here, what we want to do is actually use our middle fold option, which is our vertical fold. And I'm going to go ahead and just come in from the left and place it and click once where I see that discoloration occurring. And I'm going to do that again with this other side. So now what we can do is we can come into our 3D view and see that we have accurately modeled those vertical folds. And the next thing that we need to do is bring this building up to be 2 stories tall. So I'm going to double click outside of that building, click once on it to highlight the whole thing. And now we can come over and manually enter how tall this building. We can say 2 stories. Of course, we can always say fit to LiDAR to make it even a bit more accurate. Okay, so now that we have that first piece done, we're going to move on to our next section. Really, you can kind of go in any order you want. I'm just going to jump over to this garage section next. So let's take a peek at that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is click on Site and Smart Roof and Pitched. And we're going to go ahead and place our nodes in the corners of this building. We can follow this around. It looks like this roughly comes across to about here. And we can seal that back up at the front. So we can safely assume that this roof face does not exist since it's underneath the other one. So we'll delete that. And instead of unpitching here, we've got another vertical fold that we'll want to add. So we can simply click on our vertical fold option and place that with a single click where we see that vertical fold occurring. I can double click outside of that to now start to take a look at what this is coming together like, and that looks pretty darn good. Okay, so the next piece that I'm going to take and draw is going to be this roof face, which is kind of weird. Remember, let's open up our Map Split again and take a peek at what that was like. So if we zoom around, we can now see, so we've got this whole face as one continuous face that is pointing towards the driveway. We also have this little valley line where that is going to intersect with the garage. So let's make sure that we get that right. So what we want to do is click on Smart Roof and Pitched. And I'm going to go ahead and just zoom in a little bit here, and we'll place our nodes in the corners of this building. And this gets a little bit tricky here because we want to make sure that we don't overlap with this upper building. So we're going to click right about here and here. And what we want to do is merge so that this is going to overlap with this garage. And I'm going to just come over here and place this node right before that ridge line. And now we can bring this back up to about there and seal it up in the back. I think we want this line in just a touch and right about there. Okay, cool. So what we want to do here is let's start. We know that there is a vertical fold occurring over here. So let's go ahead and just model that now. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my vertical fold option here and click and place that with a single click right about there. Coming into 3D, we can see what that looks like now. Looks pretty good. Okay, so now what we want to do is make sure that this roof face and this roof face kind of merge together. And, because they face the same direction, we want to make sure that those go together. So that means that this little wedge does not exist. We can hit delete to remove that extra roof face. And now what's happening is that it looks like a split is occurring, but instead of that, we want those two roof faces to go together. So what we're going to do is click on this roof face once and hit delete. And now what we're going to do is a couple weird things are happening here, right? Our vertical fold is showing up with, it's a little bit askew. So what we're going to do is actually click on this eve line. We'll come down into our 3D so we can see this a bit better. When I hover over this white arrow, it turns red, and now I can pull that down so that it matches up a bit better. And I can double click and hold that all in place. And now we can see that that is pretty good. We've got that continuous roof face all in the same direction. The next piece that we haven't yet modeled accurately is that little valley. So all I need to do to get that to show up is pull down on this to get that valley to be created, a little bit more maybe, and double click, and there we go. Okay, so now one last thing that we want to model, if we come around to the back, let's open a map split once again to take a peek, and we can see that we've got this kind of back of the house section that is seems like an addition maybe, but it's very, very slightly slanted, almost a flat structure. And it looks like it's just barely intersecting underneath that other eve line. So what we want to do here is with our top-down view, we're going to go ahead and click on Smart Roof and Pitched. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and zoom in here and place a node in the corners, and actually just zooming in here, I want to make sure that this slightly overlaps with the other building so that those merge together. So placing it right about there and coming over to about so and sealing it up like that. Okay. So we know that it was slanting slightly away from the other building, which means that we don't have this roof face, or this roof face. So let's go ahead and just get rid of those by highlighting them, holding down the Shift key and hitting the Delete key on our keyboard. So now we have this single roof face, but it's a bit too steep and it's taller than our other building. So what we can do is let's simply click on this roof face and adjust the pitch. So we can just kind of bring that down to, let's see, it looks like it was maybe about 6 or 7 degrees. And the other thing that we can do is pull down on that little arrow to be able to pull it underneath the other roof face, double click to hold it in place, and that looks pretty good. Keep in mind that you can always use LiDAR when it's available to get even more accurate with your designs. So now we have accurately modeled a fairly complicated roof with multiple roof sections, roof merging, and vertical folds. This concludes our final example for this demonstration, so be sure to check out our Help Center by going to help.aurorasolar.com, or you can simply click on the question mark at the top right corner of your Aurora dashboard, which is where you can find all of our help articles, in-app guides, and can start a live chat with our support team. If you ever run into any technical issues, you can always submit a support request via the Help Center by clicking on Contact Us or by emailing them at support@aurorasolar.com.